नमस्कार, मैं हूं अशोक व्यास और मेरे साथ है स्टैच्यू ऑफ लिबर्टी. Statue of Liberty is a symbol that is inspiring not only those who are here in America but those who are anywhere in the world, and especially when we talk about NRIs, they carry a replica of Statue of Liberty with them at home, and many times kids are really fascinated by what is there in terms of history as well as a ray of hope. India is left behind, and then here is another land of opportunity. But it is not just America. There are many countries. That includes, of course, UK, Australia, and if I'm not saying China, Japan, etc., it doesn't mean that I don't know all of them. But what I know is there are some common features which all NRIs encounter wherever they are away from India, and one of them happens to be raising children. And there is not any clear-cut manual that would help us. So someone who was a journalist, who is also heading important Pratham's UK space, has brought this gift for us. Gift is a book. It's called East or West. It is an NRI mother's manual on how to bring up Desi children overseas. And the name with this on the headline is Vinati, Sukhdev. Vinati ji, aapka swagat. Namaste. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Before we come to the book, let's talk about you. And when you compare your life away from India, what is it that you feel you missed because you weren't in India?
I think the short answer is everything. I was totally in love with India. I didn't ever want to leave. My husband's job took us abroad, and I missed the sights, the sounds, the colors, the warmth of family life, and so much so that all my relatives used to think that I was crazy, because they said that you forget all the bad things about India, you romanticize it, you you indulge in sentimentality about India. But I was like that. I am romantic at heart, and I think I remembered only the good things.
Talking about your romantic heart away from India, what was it that you liked most of being in UK or Singapore, wherever you were, which you felt it's different from India, but it is good?
How do I say this without saying anything bad about India? I like the efficiency, I like the professionalism of both places, but that does not mean to say that India is not efficient. It's just that it's efficient in smaller pockets. And I wanted to create an image of India in the minds of my children, which would help them come to terms with the Indian side of their legacy, embrace it, be proud of it. And it wasn't an easy task, but I hope I've been successful. Today they are much older. My older daughter is 29, my younger daughter is 27, and they're very proud to be Indian. They call themselves global Indians. And I totally understand they're not going to be like me, Indian in the sense that I am, because I grew up in India, but they are going to be proud of their Indian ethnic heritage.
Talking about difference between you and them, and is your love for words also shared by them? You were a journalist. Talk to me a little bit about your days of writing for Indian magazines like Society and some of the other magazines. Media scene, the way magazines are produced now is also different than what it was at your time.
Absolutely. I was writing in the late 70s, early 80s, and the world has changed a lot since then. It's been 30 years, and we are a lot more digital now. Content is very different. The kind of roles that women are given in journalism are very different. When I started as a reporter with Hindustan Times, I think it was 1981, I was given soft stories. I wrote for the Sunday section. I mean, it's totally different now. We have very leading women's journalists, and they do they do solid stuff, they do political stories, but that was not so common in those days. And I think that was one of the reasons I moved away from journalism and became a copywriter with an ad agency, because advertising was one of those areas where women were given senior roles and they did well.
Writing to copywriting, and copywriting meaning brevity is the soul of your expression as a copywriter. Creativity is also a part, and then language plays an important role. How you play with words is what it is, in a way. I'll now make a bridge between the reference of expressing yourself in any language, and if it is English, it is different. If it is Hindi, it is different. So away from India, अब थोड़ा हिंदी में भी बात किया जाए तो भारत की भाषा जो है वो भी भारत से जोड़े रखने में एक महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका निभाती है. तो ये एक चुनौती और आ जाती है, क्योंकि एक तरफ तो भारत में भी हम अंग्रेजी दां होने की तरफ बढ़ रहे हैं. होलसेल सबकी इच्छा रहती है कि हमारा बच्चा अंग्रेजी बोलेगा तो अच्छा लगेगा. तो भारत से बाहर आके लेकिन आपको लगा कि उन्हें हिंदी सीखनी चाहिए?
जी, मुझे लगता है कि भाषा इज़ अ वेरी इम्पॉर्टेंट लिंक टू कल्चर. आपको हिंदी नहीं समझ आएगी तो आपको इतने मतलब म्यूज़िक है, ठुमरी, दादरा, एवरीथिंग इज़ अबाउट द लैंग्वेज. गज़ल्स आप अप्रिशिएट नहीं कर पाएंगे पूरी तरह कि कल्चर क्या होता है एक कंट्री का. और इसीलिए मैंने दोनों बच्चों को बड़ी मुश्किल से हिंदी सिखाई. शुरू में तो बहुत NRI पेरेंट्स सिखाते हैं, लेकिन वंस द चिल्ड्रन स्टार्ट गोइंग टू स्कूल, it's very difficult to keep up the language, and that's what I found as well. तो जब ये स्कूल जाने लगे तो हिंदी में जवाब नहीं देते थे. मैं हिंदी में बोलती थी तो जवाब अंग्रेज़ी में आता था, और फिर नेचुरल टेंडेंसी होती है कि जवाब अंग्रेज़ी में आ रहा है, मुझे अंग्रेज़ी भी मैं जानती हूँ, तो मैं भी फिर अंग्रेज़ी बोलने लगती थी. तो इस साइकिल को तोड़ने के लिए मैंने उनको हिंदी क्लासेस में भेजा, जहाँ भी रहे. फिर हिंदी ट्यूटर्स एम्प्लॉय किए. एंड मेरी छोटी बेटी ने तो मुझे खासकर बहुत तंग किया. हिंदी ट्यूटर घुसती थी घर में और वो बाथरूम में भाग जाती थी और दरवाज़ा बंद कर लेती थी. और फिर मतलब इट वाज अ टसल, मतलब पूरी महाभारत शुरू हो जाती थी हर सैटरडे हर संडे. लेकिन मैंने किसी तरह.
अच्छा, ये वाली जो स्पेस है ना, ये कई पेरेंट्स की लाइफ में आती है, यहाँ भी आती है. एंड व्हेन किड्स आर रिलक्टेंट टू लर्न द लैंग्वेज, देन वन ऑफ द पेरेंट वुड से छोड़ो ना. क्यों, आपके यहाँ ऐसा नहीं हुआ?
कुछ कुछ हुआ. मैं आई वॉज ऑलवेज दैट स्टर्न पेरेंट. My husband was always indulging the children, and obviously they loved him more. Mummy was the bad person, and Dad was cool and didn't insist on things. So it was hard work, but both have now acknowledged that it was a great thing to be able to speak Hindi, because it gives them an ease and a familiarity when they go to India. They can relate better. They can even in practical terms, they can take a taxi and go somewhere, or they can take a bus even. But if you don't know the language, you're always a bit insecure.
आपने इसमें जो चैप्टर लिखा उसकी कुछ हिस्सा आप हमारे दर्शकों तक पहुंचाए. 6 चैप्टर है ये, मतलब द इम्पोर्टेंस ऑफ टीचिंग एन इंडियन लैंग्वेज. हिंदी है हम, वतन है हिंदुस्तान हमारा. विनती सुखदेव जी की ये जो NRI मदर्स के लिए मैनुअल है, हाउ टू ब्रिंग अप देसी चिल्ड्रन ओवरसीज, उसमें इस पर भी जोर दिया गया है कि वे लैंग्वेज जो है वो कोई ना कोई सीखो. तो हिंदी सब नहीं सीखते हैं, कुछ लोग गुजराती, पंजाबी या जो भी नेटिव लैंग्वेज है वही सीखते हैं. उसके बारे में आप कुछ कमेंट करते हुए इस चैप्टर की तरफ बढ़ें.
It doesn't matter what language, which Indian language they learn. I'm often told by parents that we could not keep an Indian language alive in the home because I'm Tamilian and I speak Tamil and my husband speaks Bengali. And my answer to them is choose one of the languages and go for it, because it's better they speak one rather than none. So I think it's a question of persisting and persevering, and I'm sure you can get there.
Wonderful. So, what have you written in this chapter?
Okay, so I'm talking in this chapter about my daughter Mahima. When she went to school in England in 1993, she was, 1990, she was about 2 years old, and she went to a play group, and we had spoken to her only in Hindi at home. Both my husband and I spoke Hindi, and she didn't have a word. This is a child growing up in England, but not a word of English. So when I went to her play group, the first thing the teacher did was to give me an earful. She said, "Mrs. Sukhdev, you speak perfect English. How come your daughter can't speak a word of English?" But I took it in my stride. I explained to the teacher that it's my only chance to give my children that gift of Hindi. And if I don't do it in the first 2 years of life, they are not going to ever learn. So I'm going to read you a bit about my feelings when I was, and she insisted that I sit outside the class. This was before the days of mobile phones. So I had to sit outside the class, and I had to think about various issues in my life. So I'm just going to read you that para. Much as it may sound amusing written down and in the past, it is a struggle. Always difficult to make children living in an alien environment realize and appreciate that India is relevant to their lives, that the knowledge of an Indian language is an important life skill or an essential part of their identity, and that they will actually thank you one day for persisting with familiarizing them with the language. A lot of my early parenting was done in the years before India became cool. In the early 90s, when Mahima turned up at her local playgroup in the UK with no knowledge of English, the teacher looked horrified, pronounced she would be confused trying to speak both languages, and made me sit outside the class for a whole week in case she had trouble communicating with Mahima. Remember, this was in the days before mobile phones, so I had no choice. Besieged by self-doubt about my rash neglect of the environment my child was growing up in, worried that she would cry and feel lonely in a sea of foreign faces and a strange tongue, I had little choice. So I arrived at the playgroup with a confused Mahima, a book I had been trying to read for months, and a toddler, Ashima, who would constantly try and enter the playgroup, and whom I would constantly have to shush. It was both uncomfortable and humiliating.
It was both uncomfortable and humiliating, but that experience when Vinati Sukhdev shares in the book, it could be empowering for some of the new NRI mothers who probably would be walking through the similar experience. How this book is laid out and how it is received, and what has been the response of readers in UK and some other places, and why Vinati ji decided to contribute all the proceedings of this book for Pratham. We'll talk to her right after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching It's a very wide angle with Ashok Vyas, and my guest today is Vinati Sukhdev, and her book East or West brings her here to America from UK. And we are talking about your book, Vinati ji. It's not easy to compile all your ideas and lay them, arrange them in a way which forms a proper book. So, how long it took you to sort of conceive of this idea and then finally have this manuscript?
I think they say everyone has one book in them which is easy to write, and I think this was my book because I didn't have trouble writing it. But yes, you are right, between just spelling it all out and actually formatting it into different chapters, thinking of new chapters to write. For instance, my first chapter, which is on early parenting, was written last because I realized that young mothers have a very great interest in parenting. So I wrote something specially for them. I also had the editors insisted on takeaway points. So, when I was editing the book, I had to do bullet points, summaries of the chapters. So all that took time, and I think all in all, it took about maybe a year and maybe a year and a half, I would think.
Okay, so you have the experience of being a copywriter and you were also a journalist. Who was sitting more forcefully on your shoulders while you were editing the book, copywriter or the reporter?
I think it was a combination of both, a happy combination, because I had the observation of being a journalist. I mean, a lot of people said, how did you remember all this about your children? I mean, everyone goes through the parenting journey, but I had acute observation skills. I had the memory of a journalist, noticing the small details. But then I think the way I expressed the thoughts with brevity and wit was the copywriting part of it. So I think I used both my professions to my advantage, I think.
Okay, another thing is, this is such a common thing for all NRIs. Parenting, of course, everybody is doing it. So they probably may think that, will this book be interesting? From that point of view, were you aware that, if you are not passing through that experience, then maybe it's something new that you would look forward to. Otherwise, you'll say, oh, I know. So, what is the fresh thing which you consciously think is a part of the book?
I think the fresh thing is that the book is there, because there are 25 to 30 million Indians living abroad. And I was shocked to find that this kind of book didn't exist. And we all share this experience of parenting, and there are parenting books on really esoteric topics like how to be a good stepdad and how to bring up an eco-friendly baby, but there's no book about how to bring up a good Indian Desi child when you live abroad. And I think India has great things to offer, and so why shouldn't we take what is the best of India and let our children, adapt that to their lives.
But the first generation Indian Americans, or wherever they are, they have more of India in them, and which is throbbing in their heart. And many times there is a challenge that they convey or they share the same India with their kids, which normally doesn't happen. And that also adds to additional challenge for most of the parents. And how do you suggest they should address it?
Are you saying that the India that we try and give to our children is the India that we left behind?
That is one part of it. But another part, the way you have understood India, because you lived there, it is not necessary for your children to appreciate it in the same way.
Absolutely, I agree with you. My children, while I've tried really hard, they speak an Indian language. One does Indian dance, the other one plays the tabla, but they can never be Indian in the way I am or you are, because we have grown up in India. But there are certainly wonderful Indian values. There is a whole wealth of culture, art and history which they can experience and understand better if we give them the tools to understand it. And I wanted them to make Indianness part of their global identity. They will never be Indian the way I am, but I wanted them to be proud of India in their identity kit.
Okay, when you say you wanted Indianness, if I say, to be a part of their global identity, what role it plays and why it is important?
I think I have seen parents veer between two extremes. There is the kind of parent, the Dilwale Dulhania type of family, where the father is stern and the children lead duplicitous lives. They have a modern life outside, but a very Indian life at home. But it's not a happy thing. And then there are the other kinds of Indians who were Kapoor but have become Coopers. And I think I was trying to achieve something in between, a judicious mix, a balanced mix. And I think it's possible to take the best of India and ignore the bad things, or we don't have to, look at the bad things. And there are certainly bad things in modern India. We don't have to look at them. But there's enough diversity in India to choose from.
Absolutely. And there is chapter number 4 in the book, which is Culture, Art and History in Bite-sized Portions. Baaton baaton mein baat ban jaye. And interestingly, most of the chapters begin with few words of Hindi also. I think that adds to a little bit of fun part of it, plus Indian touch both.
Yes, absolutely. That is my copywriting bit. This is a chapter in which I have emphasized that we should take the good, show India where its strengths are. And certainly art, culture and history are Indian strengths. So this is my daughter writing, and the way to do it for parents is to not do it in terms of lessons, but to build it into everyday life. So my husband and I always made it a point to talk about Indian things at the dining table. So this is a particular incident where one of my daughters decided to become a vegetarian, and this was the kind of conversation we had. My husband's a great disciple of Gandhi, so obviously. So this is Ashima writing, it's her voice. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was at our table last night. He and Jawaharlal Nehru and other long deceased Indian freedom fighters have a habit of cropping up quite often at meal times actually. My parents take the whole thing of keeping us children rooted in India quite seriously. Quite a challenge, since my sister and I have not lived in India since we were 10 and 8 respectively. Their indoctrination has included many years of weekend Hindi classes and lessons in Indian classical music and dance, some of which we have genuinely enjoyed, others we have silently and sometimes not so silently suffered. Yet the dining table crowns it all. Somehow they seem to think that generous helpings of chicken korma and dum aloo will help us imbibe the culture, philosophy, history lessons on India and make them more palatable. I have to admit they do. To get back to Gandhi, it all started with me announcing that I wanted to turn vegetarian. Why? Isn't the chicken nice? Asked Mum, who despite being very oriented to Indian history tends to concentrate on the here and now mostly. Oh no, Mum, I countered. It is not that at all. I have thought about it very deeply, and I abhor the idea of meat festering in my digestive tract for 48 hours. Vegetarian food is easier to digest and is more healthy. Gandhi was a vegetarian, said my father, in a tone that suggested a long monologue on Gandhi's eating habits was about to commence. Having had Gandhi as a dinner guest many more times than I would have cared to invite him to the table myself meant that I already knew a lot on the subject. The great man had been a vegetarian all his life, had become increasingly sparing in his diet with advancing age, and lived mostly on goat's milk, fruit, nuts, and leafy vegetables, when he was not fasting as a protest against British rule in India, that is. Now you see here that just in terms of conversation, she has picked up so many things about Gandhi, about his life, about his fasting, about, you know.
Absolutely. So there is humor and there is history and there is happiness. And with humor, happiness and history, here is a healthy recipe for raising healthy children abroad with touch of India. And the book written by Vinati Sukhdev, East or West, NRI Mothers Manual on How to Bring Up Desi Children Overseas. Vinati, this book is available on Amazon, right?
Yes, you can order it on Amazon. And as you had mentioned, my share of the proceeds will go to Pratham. It's India's largest education NGO. And that's the reason I'm doing that is because I feel the problems in this book are first world problems. Should our children do Bharatnatyam or should they do Bhangra? But there are Indian parents in India who have far more fundamental problems, and I think the money should go to them. So
wonderful. On that wonderful thought of reaching out with help, and also they say walk the talk, so she is writing and asking you to write where it is needed. East or West is a promising book which brings a lot of insight and a sense of optimism in terms of taking care of the wide range of concerns that parents away from India have. And compliments, congratulations to you,
Thank you
for coming up with this book.
Thank you.
Thanks to her and thanks to all of you for being with us. This is Ashok Vyas.